Hello, welcome to day 6 of Revolutionary Actions. Today's topic is the Reign of Terror. The French Revolution proceeded into the period of the Reign of Terror, but a lot of students had a question about the guillotine, so we're going to start there. Question number 1, how was the guillotine a more democratic and merciful manner of execution? So, in the years before the French Revolution, in the old regime, the main manners of execution for traitors, for spies, for serious offenses, was to be drawn and quartered, or any of a number of other terrible, horrible, long drawn out executions. Drawing and quartering often included withdrawing and drawing out the internal organs of the convicted person while they're still alive. The quartering portion included having your 4 major limbs pulled in opposite directions by horses, having your limbs chopped off one by one so that your body was quartered. Beheading in one clean blow was a punishment reserved for nobles and royalty only, and this was unfair. Beheadings were by far the most painless way to die, and these other types of deaths, even by hanging, were intended to be painful and long and drawn out. Joseph Guillotine, the inventor or refiner of this machine, the guillotine in English, he was actually opposed to the death penalty in its entirety. But were there to be a death penalty, were we to execute people, he wanted it to be at least the least bad experience possible. He wanted it to be quick and painless and merciful. The first executions done with the guillotine, actually people booed because the criminal was killed too quickly. The spectacle was over too fast. Guillotines, though, quickly became popular as a more democratic manner of execution, affording everybody the right of being beheaded. It's more accurate, it's more merciful, it cuts the head off almost always in one blow, as opposed to the previous system. One of the first people to be executed by the guillotine, this is a side note, was King Louis XVI himself. Here he is approaching the scaffolding, and here is his head held up to the crowd. So it's democratic also in that everyone, from the king all the way down, was killed using this tool. Question number 2, what was the Committee of Public Safety and what was its goal? The title Committee of Public Safety is often confusing and seems ironic considering it oversaw the deaths of so many people. The Committee of Public Safety was intended to make the execution of counter-revolutionaries more safe, more merciful, more democratic. If you recall, in the previous year, the September massacres had been a wild, uncontrolled massacre of churchmen and nobles. The sans-culottes, the not fancy pants people, the not fancy knee pants people, marauded around Paris and murdered and tortured and brutally violated nobles and clergy. The Committee of Public Safety recognized that many of those enemies of the revolution deserved to die, but it intended to execute them in a more organized and safe manner. The Committee of Public Safety was saying, the September massacres were too messy and too violent, too much torture, too much rape, etc. Instead, we'll use the guillotine. It's efficient, it's fair, and it's not torture. Robespierre himself was actually opposed to the death penalty, but for the same reasons as Dr. Guillotin, who invented the machine itself. If we're going to execute people, this is the way to do it. It's the least painful way. The sans-culottes, with those without the fancy knee pants, were a lot of the leaders of these executions. The Committee of Public Safety relied on these most liberal and most radical members of the revolution. And then they also used another article of clothing to identify themselves, the bonnet rouge, the red bonnet. The red, it's like a beanie. You can see a woman here wearing it, a woman here wearing it. These men are all wearing it. And here, even the guillotine itself is wearing the red bonnet of the revolution. By wearing the red bonnet, the Phrygian cap, the symbol of freedom and liberty, you telegraph to everybody what side of the revolution you are on, and that you are on the side of the sans-culottes, you're on the side of the people. There's another major group of people that support the Committee on Public Safety's many, many executions, and they are the tricoteuses, les tricoteuses here. Here's a picture of them. These are the knitting women who supposedly sat at the guillotine every day, knitting and watching the executions and cheering them on. So the goal of the Committee of Public Safety was to organize and protect the revolution from its enemies, and also to make sure that the use of terror was in the name of the revolution and was executed carefully. Number 3, what things other than the government did the revolution try to change? The goals of the French Revolution were wide-reaching. Many of the early reforms that they made were focused on church and daily life. Initially, the Catholic Church was supposed to be closed. The priests were supposed to lose their jobs and be elected to be hired by the state. The Catholic Church lost its lands, it lost its political power. Church lands and property were sold, and the churches were replaced with a religion in favor of reason. Dechristianization was replaced with the Festival of Reason. Here you have a mountain with the Temple of Philosophy at the top. And here, a few years later, the Cult of the Supreme Being, and you have another mountain, and at the top are philosophers and scientists and the Tree of Liberty, and the tree itself is even wearing a little red bonnet. So religion, Catholicism, Christianity was supposed to be eliminated and replaced with the Cult of Reason, with the Festival of Reason, with the Cult of the Supreme Being. Starting in 1793, the churches were officially closed and were taken over as meeting halls and stables and any other public use. The revolution, the National Assembly, also wanted to totally reform life. They wanted to make everything different than the way it had been before, get rid of all the old, outdated things like Christianity. They also renamed the months of the year. Here you have a calendar. This is the month of Germinal, which is in March, the month of the germination of seeds. This is Thermidor, which is in the late part of July, the month of heat. They renamed all the months. They renumbered the months. Every month had 30 days. Each week had 10 days. Each month was 3 weeks of 10 days. This way, Sundays were gone, which is in further service of getting rid of Christianity. If you don't know what day is Sunday, you don't know what day is the Lord's Day, and you won't be able to continue to be Catholic. They also changed time itself. They divided the day into 10 hours of 100 minutes. They rearranged the units of measurement, which is where we get the metric system. Instead of the messy system of distances and weights and measures, instead we got centimeters and meters and kilometers and their tidy system of units of 10. Number 4, why was September 1793 to July 1794 called the Terror? So the war with foreign countries expanded. France was under more pressure than ever. The French army was fighting Austria and Prussia and Great Britain and Holland and Spain at the same time. The Jacobins, one of these revolutionary groups led by Robespierre, arranged for hundreds of thousands of more soldiers to be drafted. By 1794, there were about 800,000 French citizens in the army, and this army included women. The Reign of Terror, though, was in response to these continued wars. France was being attacked on all sides by a number of other countries, and the National Convention, led by people like Robespierre, felt like they were under attack from within as well. They kept feeling like the revolution had to go further in order to cement its place and cement its permanence. But over time, stuff got kind of out of control. The economy was still a mess. Productivity was still low. There still was shortages of food and shortages of everything, including bread and salt. And there was a debate. How far should the revolution go? Should we eliminate all religion, or should we keep some of it? Should we give rights to women, or should we not? Should we end slavery in the colonies, or should we not? And some very extreme people were in favor of all these things. Famously, Marat, who is pictured here in this cartoon dead, was one of the most radical, calling for the deaths and executions of many people who weren't radical enough. However, he was murdered by Charlotte Corday, this woman here, who felt she was doing a favor to the Republic by putting him to death and thus saving the lives of all the people he would continue to denounce. The terror also affected, we have two examples of women. So Charlotte Corday over here and Olympe de Gouges over here. She was in favor of less extreme change and less revolutionary change. She wanted to continue with Christianity and other traditions, but she also wanted rights for women. She was the author of the Rights of Women, which was a response to the rights of man. But she was executed as well for not being revolutionary enough and not wanting to be as radical as Robespierre and his Committee of Public Safety. During the terror, anyone who was less radical than Robespierre himself was in danger of execution. And during this 11th month period, somewhere close to 40,000 people were executed. So why was it called the terror? Well, it got out of control. So how did the terror get out of control? It claimed the lives of the revolutionaries themselves. It claimed the lives of anyone who was not radical enough. People started to be suspicious of the educated among the revolutionaries. Anyone with any amount of wealth was suspected. Anyone who was not excited enough about the executions happening every day was suspected. An individual who expressed sadness about a family member who was executed was also suspect. Famously, even children were targeted. Children who made comments disliking the revolution were also up for execution. There's still no food, still no money, and poverty is still increasing. And the terror, the continual denunciation of people by other people, only accelerated. This famous painting over here on the left is titled Waiting for Execution. The terror at its worst eliminated the possibility of appeal, it eliminated trial, it eliminated the need for witnesses or evidence. If a person is denounced, then the Committee of Public Safety, the National Convention, maybe Robespierre himself could just have the person executed. Eventually, Robespierre himself goes a little too far, and he is accused of destroying the revolution. It's unclear exactly how it happens, but this picture here is a combination of all of the events that happened leading up to his death. He either was shot in the jaw or shot himself in the jaw in a failed suicide attempt. It's unclear which. But either way, the day after he was shot, he was sent to the guillotine. And once he died, the terror calmed down. Those are your 5 questions for today. Write your summaries and submit them. I'll see you tomorrow.